Final Wars Godzilla vs. Legendary or Monstrous Godzilla is actually one of the better matchups that this fandom is very, infatuated with. I think, to be honest, I can have some type of discussion that doesn't end in, he blitzes and one-shots like most of the debates that this fandom seems to cook up. So why not? Let me give you guys something special that I've been planning to do for a while now, as me and another YouTuber, Titan Mythical Series, have collaborated to give you guys a thorough breakdown and analysis for this matchup, as well as for the first time a fully animated segment to complement it. I want to reiterate that this would not be the norm for most videos, but for event videos such as this, or like special occasions, I think you'd be down to expect it. Normally this is the part of the video where I ask you guys to hit the like button for some type of like goal, but instead of that, I just want to say thank you. I started this YouTube hustle around a year ago with 300 subscribers, and now we are here at 25,000. It's been very fun to get to know you guys and meet you guys as well. So for today, instead of a like goal, I think I want to just ask you guys to subscribe to today's animator, as because of his kindness, I get to give you guys something special. So with that being said, let's get right into the breakdown. The year was 1954. Japan had only been 9 years removed from the Pacific conflict. During this time, the nation made great efforts to repent for its past sins and try to work to build a better and brighter future. But little did they know that this was just the start of a whole new war with something just as dangerous and even more destructive. As during this period, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, made his glorious entrance and subsequently chose to destroy Tokyo. This event caused a new era in Tokyo's history, being an era of giant monsters and kaiju. Despite Godzilla choosing to leave Tokyo alone after being hit with the Oxygen Destroyer, there were many kaiju that followed his appearance, with none of them being quite as powerful as him. And as previously mentioned, he was hit with the Oxygen Destroyer, which is his first real feat. And unlike his original counterpart, he actually survived the blast and wasn't, turned into bones. If you watched any of my older videos, you'd know how powerful this Oxygen Destroyer is, because as its name implies, the weapon actually destroys oxygen and splitting the atoms that make up the element. And because of this, the yield of the weapon has been calculated to be at around 9.5 exatons of TNT, which is multi-continental. Godzilla survived this weapon, so it would scale to him. After this first appearance, Godzilla would make sporadic appearances throughout the country, but during a final climactic showdown with the Gotengo, Godzilla found himself frozen. But after the Exilian invasion, the humans determined that he was their last hope. And I mean, when they woke him up, he went straight to business, as the first thing he does is obliterate Gigan with a single atomic breath, which is very important because Gigan in the lore during his first invasion on the planet Earth was able to uproot and sink 2 huge continents in a flash, which when calculated would be very deep into multi-continental, sitting at around 4.1 to even 22 exatons of TNT. Seeing as how Godzilla one-shotted him and Gigan's attacks were shown to do no damage to Godzilla, this should overall be enough to qualify Godzilla as a one-shot's difference stronger than Gigan, which would be a power difference of around 10 times, taking Gigan's feat of destroying 2 continents at once and then multiplying that output by 10, and it would mean that Godzilla can output energy equivalent to 41 to even 220 exatons of TNT, which is moon level. But we can actually get Godzilla far higher in base, and we're gonna have to talk about the Exilians and their lie, that being Gorath. The Exilians told humanity that Gorath was a massive planetoid object that would soon crash into the Earth, blowing up both constructs. Obviously, this was a lie, so you can't really scale Godzilla to this level of power by his showing in the film of blowing up Gorath, as it's, made pretty apparent that, they were lying. But the only thing that really matters is that humanity believed the lie, as they would go on to state that with all of their weapons' firepower, they would actually be capable of stopping Gorath. The only contention that I can think of is that the Exilians were lying, but once again, humanity did not believe that, and their statement was based on the simulation that they were shown. This scales to Godzilla, as these same humans would go on to say that Godzilla was the most powerful force on the planet Earth, and that he was a threat too great to have even walking around, implying that they don't think they could handle him, which I mean is pretty consistent with the narrative, as Godzilla low diffs the army of kaiju that they were crippled by. So the human beings in this film believed that with all their weapons they could stop this, but not Godzilla. I want to note that the simulation that they've been shown was displaying a crash so powerful that it would be able to destroy the Earth 36 times over, meaning that Godzilla would scale to this large planetary amounts of power, and that's just when he's in base. And this is pretty consistent, as the same human beings state that Godzilla would be able to destroy the world and such. I want to move on to his durability and reactive evolution, as I think they're pretty important to take note of, as later in the film he channels his full power into a spiral variant of his atomic breath in order to destroy the incoming Gorath. And Monster X, who's at the epicenter of this explosion, no-sells it and isn't even hurt by it and just starts to fight Godzilla. And he even overwhelms him for the start of the fight. Stacked on top of the fact that he was outright stated to be stronger than Godzilla during this point in time, add that on the fact that Godzilla was still able to endure blows from this Monster X and was even winning in the later half of the fight, seemingly implying that he gets stronger as he has to, very akin to Dragon Ball or like a Zenkai. And he can also endure attacks from characters who can no-sell the peak of his current points of power. But even this guy has his limits, as after Monster X evolves into Kaiju Ghidorah, Final Wars Godzilla is essentially incapacitated by a single shot of Kaiju's gravity beams, and he spends the duration of the fight getting ragdolled, as well as tossed around. Seeing as how Godzilla can endure attacks from characters who can no-sell his current peaks in power, this would suggest that for him to get dropped like this, there's a significant gap in power between Kaiju Ghidorah and base Final Wars Godzilla, which may be consistent as Kaiju Ghidorah is referenced to have cosmic power, and he is also confirmed to be a threat to the Earth's very existence, which would mean that he's a planet buster, because if you're surface wiping, the planet still technically exists. Destroying the planet from the surface, like most fiction kind of displays, would be a dwarf star level feat, and yeah, Godzilla doesn't really scale yet, as he would later go on and get an amped form and enter a state referenced as Heavenly Godzilla, where he's able to easily dispose of Kaiju Ghidorah, defeating the Emperor of the Universe with a couple atomic breath attacks, including one red spiral ray. Moving on to Final Wars Godzilla's speed, he being the FTL plus ranges, as it mostly comes from the fact that Godzilla was able to react to Gorath in the way that he was, while the object was moving in the atmosphere in real time, as he perceives it moving in slow motion, despite the fact that it's moving at relativistic plus speeds. Because of this, Godzilla's reaction time has been calculated to be at a low end of around 10 times faster than the speed of light, and at most 30 times faster than the speed of light. Keep in mind this would be his base, as logically he should be much faster while in his heavenly mode, as Kaiju Ghidorah could easily react to Godzilla's atomic breath and even catch it, and then when Godzilla gets amped, he's just blitzed by the attack. Because of this scaling chain, Godzilla would easily fall into the FTL plus ranges of speed. Now moving on to some minor things that I feel like should be noted. He stated to be a good martial artist, and he was able to beat monsters such as King Caesar, who uses several martial arts techniques. He also has incredible stamina, as he was able to essentially gauntlet run 10 kaiju in a row while consistently being on the move, only really exerting himself during his battle with Monster X. He has resistances to molecular destruction, as he survived the Oxygen Destroyer, and during his battle in the Arctic with the Gotengo, which is very important, as he was able to endure weapons such as the Maser vehicles, which were used against him and can notably destroy cells of the living creature that it's fighting. So overall, oh wait, my bad, I forgot. How could I? The Gooning. This interpretation of the character gets a lot of wank, and I honestly don't even have any idea why. I mean, I was a kid too once. I thought he was the strongest Godzilla at a certain point in time, but I was like 10, you know? There's really people on this app that are in like college wanking this iteration of the character. Usually they'll use a whole bunch of Death of the Author nonsense hype statements, stuff like Godzilla Final Wars is the strongest and fastest Godzilla, Kaiser is the strongest Ghidorah of all time. And when properly analyzed, these statements hold no real ground and should just be ignored, as there are plenty of Godzillas that get to the same level of power as Final Wars and then some. Heck, Final Wars Godzilla isn't even the strongest Godzilla of the Millennium Era, believe it or not. Like, call me when Final Wars Godzilla shot with a freaking black hole gun. But despite this, and his annoying goons, this Godzilla proved himself as a worthy logical endpoint for the character. And despite being the 50th anniversary film for such a diverse and going all over the place franchise as Godzilla, the film overall did a pretty good job of cementing Godzilla as a force of nature to be respected. And as for a lot of the fans growing up during the early 2000s like myself, this really was the final Godzilla movie for a long time. Well, it was like that until our next Kabang came along. Millions of years ago, before the Romans, before the Egyptians, and even before the dinosaurs, in a time where the planet was 10 times more radioactive than it is today, there were monsters. Giant kaiju, or titans most specifically. Most of these guys were pretty neutral, some of them were destroyers, and some were protectors. But there was one titan to balance it all out. And I'm of course talking about Titanus Gojira, or as you may know him, Godzilla. Godzilla spent his time moderating the titans until bam! A meteorite hit him point blank. This particular meteorite caused the Permian extinction, which killed 90% of all life on the planet at the time, and caused a massive explosion, at which Godzilla found himself at the epicenter of. And when calculated, this would mean that he would be able to endure forces in the pentatons. From there, Godzilla would go into hibernation and make sporadic appearances throughout the ancient past, mostly whenever he was needed. But for the most part, he was in hibernation until the year 1945, where the bombings that ended the Second World War woke up the Shinomura, which also woke up Godzilla. After beating the parasitic terror, the military found out that they had a kaiju-sized problem at their hands, which basically led to them, as they put it, testing out their most powerful nuclear bombs. As some of you history buffs know, in our IRL world, during the 50s, a lot of nuclear bombs were tested in the Pacific. But yeah, in the Monsterverse, those tests weren't tests. They were just trying to kill Godzilla, and none of them worked. Eventually, though, after that stunt, our boy went back into hibernation until two mortals woke up and decided to threaten the natural balance of the world. And for the past 13 years, Godzilla has been fighting a variety of enemies, some from the past and some man-made, all in order to protect his home. And if it's not evident enough, from these newer instances is where we will draw a massive chunk of this guy's scaling. So let's dive right into that. Nothing really notable happens in Godzilla 2014, so skipping right to Godzilla King of the Monsters, this is where Godzilla will get his first nice chunk of scaling, as it comes from his performance against his ancient rival, King Ghidorah. Ghidorah is a creature who threatened to destroy the planet by submerging it in a gigantic superstorm, which Ghidorah passively generated, by the way, just by flapping his wings as well. Creating these storms would be a feat requiring around 153 petatons of TNT, or multi-continental, but much deeper into multi-continental than the Big G's old feat of no-selling a meteor to the face. But anyways, Ghidorah actually moving these storms would put the three-headed terror's kinetic energy output at around 216 exatons, which is moon level. Godzilla scales to this particular output as he literally stops Ghidorah in his tracks and tackles him during their ocean battle, also subsequently overpowering the False King's kinetic energy output, granting Godzilla some easy moon level scaling. But skipping to GVK now, as it's overall the film that we need to use to get a nice baseline to his overall stats, as we're gonna have to talk about his feat of drilling into the hollow earth with his atomic breath, which is a feat I have talked about extensively in the past. But essentially, due to Godzilla's atomic breath working on a subatomic level, the AP of this particular beam would get it to around moon level at a low end, and even small planetary to just planetary at a mid and high end respectively. Godzilla physically scales his output as you would go on to fight Mechagodzilla and stalemate Mechagodzilla's atomic breath, which is classified at over 2,000 times stronger than the previous output that drilled into the hollow earth, according to an in-universe Apex file. Godzilla stalemated the beam at 50% power no less, and MG was required to put more energy into the attack. And Godzilla would also get hit point blank with this, and he would be pretty much relatively fine, all things considered. Since durability scales to attack potency due to Nern's third law, Godzilla does scale to this output. Taking the mid-end value for the whole Earth drill and multiplying it by a difference of over 2,000 times, and Mechagodzilla's proton scream will be equivalent to large planetary worths of energy. Godzilla was at 50% when he endured this, so just multiplying that value for 2 for a full power base Godzilla, and that would easily grant the King of the Monsters some large planetary to even dwarf star levels of scaling. This may be consistent with a statement from the same film, where it's confirmed that the Hollow Earth's total energy output is merely almost identical to values found in Godzilla. In order to find a value for this, we are going to have to dive into the soft canon show Monarch Legacy of Monsters, which actually gives us a confirmed energy output for small pockets, using this value and then upscaling it in proportion based on the model seen in GVK, and it's been found that the full construct would be radiating dwarf star ranges of power. I know Monarch is kind of soft canon, but it still operates in the field of canon. So minor things like the energy output of small pockets and then using canon models to find a definitive value is fair enough in my opinion. Plus, dwarf star levels of scaling is a lot better and much more consistent than the proposed black hole statements from Monarch Legacy of Monsters, but ignoring that, this dwarf star estimate for his power would scale to his base, which is important because Godzilla has access to his evolved state, which on its own is a 2 times multiplier, but the form is noted to have a 20 times increased capacity. This is notable because when Godzilla supercharged his stats in Rio, his energy is stated to be barely contained, meaning that yes, Evolved Godzilla is actually 20 times above his old base, but only during the final battle in Rio when his aura is literally gushing out, meaning that supercharged Evolve is pretty much a 10 times multiplier onto base evolve. So to put it in simpler terms, regular pink is 2 times above base, and super pink is 10 times above regular pink, making the infamous scan of Godzilla evolved having a 20 times increased energy output actually consistent. As for his speed now, he would easily fall into the FTL plus levels of speed, as his evolved state is confirmed to be a boost to his speed as well as power, meaning that he should upscale characters such as base Ghidorah and Mechagodzilla, and particularly King Kong, who have all shown the ability to dodge and react and even block Godzilla's atomic breath, which is composed of Cherenkov radiation, meaning that it moves at 75% the speed of light. Keep in mind that before becoming pink, his base self was already faster than Kong, as well as confirmed to be faster than Mechagodzilla as well, so his current base would already find himself in the FTL plus ranges. Overall, legendary Godzilla in his decade-long reign has proven to be quite the Godzilla, despite essentially being the new kid on the block and the first real prominent Hollywood version of the character. His dominance and power that he radiates has helped him to cement his spot as one of the best Godzillas of all time. And just like that, the cabans are set. This matchup will take place in the Monsterverse, more specifically the deserts of Egypt. Both titans will start far away from each other to maximize each of their chances. So with that being said, let's end this debate once and for all and see who's the real king of the monsters. And just like that, we have a winner. But before I explain the reasoning and outcome, once again, I'd like to thank today's animator, being Titan Mythical Series, for the stellar animation. He did it for free, and he came to me wanting to do an animation for one of my videos out of the kindness of his heart. So be sure to check out the pinned comment to support his channel. And while you're down there, be sure to tell me if you want more animations by this guy on the channel here. But moving on to the analysis, both Godzillas at first glance were very close in stats, but upon further glance, the advantages of both become very clear. Base to base, Monsterverse was very clearly stronger, as he had very casual dwarf star level ends, whereas Final Wars kinda just caps at large planetary and base, with him being shown to get dragged around by a dwarf star level character being Kaiser Ghidorah. So while Final Wars Godzilla's skill and speed and adaptation advantage ensured that he wouldn't die instantly, it was pretty clear that Final Wars Godzilla's only hope was to get his heavenly power. Final War Godzilla's dwarf star level ends involve him destroying Kaiser, who was a planet buster, but due to the way he was implied to be able to planet bust, he would find himself in the dwarf star level ranges, or around 270 Ronatons. MV Godzilla, as previously mentioned, scales above the Hollow Earth, which has a calculated output of around 43.3 Ronatons, multiplying that by 2 to accommodate for his evolved state, and that would mean that he would scale to roughly 90 Ronatons. So Final Wars Godzilla would actually be stronger than MV in his evolved state. But MV had 2 trump cards. His crazy durability, as Monster vs. Godzilla can endure his own attack potency stacked on itself, as shown when Kong literally charges up an axe, powered with multiple shots of Godzilla's prolonged breath attacks, and then he headshots Godzilla with the dang thing, and it only makes him mad if anything. Another showcase of this is when he was able to fight with Shimu before supercharging himself. As we have established, the gap in power between supercharged evolved and regular evolved is around 10 times. Keep in mind, supercharged evolved was stated to, be relative to Shimu, meaning that Shimu was 10 times stronger than just base evolved, and Godzilla was fighting that opponent and enduring blows from that Titan for a very prolonged period of time and wasn't like dying. It's literally a one-shot gap. And more importantly, Godzilla had an easy access to supercharge himself on top of his evolved state, which grants him a 10 times multiplier. Plugging that into our value of roughly 90 Ronatons, and suddenly Godzilla scales to almost 900 Ronatons. All of a sudden, Heavenly Godzilla's 270 Ronatons aren't looking too impressive. And ultimately, that's what the battle came down to. While Final Wars Godzilla had much better skill and speed, and even adaptation, he wouldn't ever be able to utilize those abilities against someone as strong and even more durable as supercharged evolved Godzilla. Combine that with legendary Godzilla's overall aggressive and animalistic fighting style, and it stands to reason that Final Wars just found himself delaying the inevitable, as he would just get overwhelmed. So while yes, Final Wars Godzilla is the most powerful kaiju in his verse, but looking at the matchup that we have right here, he should not have brought that energy into the MV. So as it seems, Final Wars Godzilla should have just stopped while he was ahead. See what I did there? The winner of today's matchup is Legendary Godzilla.